relations, marketing, and social media in healthcare requires making the right moves at the right time. Welcome to the Overrated and Underused show. Here's your hosts, experienced marketers Jennings and Testa, with special guest Adrian Stoner. Overrated and Underused, the Overrated and Underused show.
Welcome to Overrated and Underused. We're your hosts, Tom and Jen. And Happy New Year to everyone. It's January 2022, Jen.
I know. I cannot believe it. I feel like 2021 just started. So where has the time gone?
I know. And I think, is this a happy anniversary? Are we entering year 3 of ONU Radio?
Yeah, we're officially 2 years old. We've had 2 years of shows.
But I think, it's been an exciting 2 years. Not to use the P word, but we've been, some of it through the pandemic, and we've had some interesting topics to discuss. But as we turn the calendar, hopefully 2022 is looking a little different. And, that might, given what's happening on the healthcare front. And so we might have some different looks at things in 2022.
Yeah, I'm personally excited about what the next year holds for healthcare marketing, and, how things will kind of evolve and change in all the new topics that we'll get to talk about on this show. So yeah, I'm excited to see it all unfold.
And if anyone wants to, I'm sure our listeners already know this because they're dedicated listeners who listened to our December episode. But for those of you who hadn't had the opportunity, you get to hear what Jennifer, myself, and Dave Anderson had to say about what we expect in the year ahead. So curious to see how many of those topics come to fruition, and some of the points we made, our predictions. Hopefully some good things in 2022.
Today's episode, we're going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, starting the year off right, talking about money.
I hope our special effects crew had some cha-ching sign.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. No, so not specifically money, but we're going to look at money in the aspect of budgeting for marketing programs. So putting together marketing budgets for your organization.
Yeah, it's not an easy topic to discuss. I mean, obviously budgeting isn't as simple as slapping a dollar amount at the end of a scope of work or something. So there's a lot that goes into it. And it can be challenging because there are so many aspects of it. So let's get into it, Jennifer. Budgeting.
Let's do it. Budgeting. But it is something we're asked about a lot, especially when it's prospective clients or, new clients that we're bringing into the agency that we work with. Not only how much should they budget for marketing services, but also, questions around how to tie sales metrics and ROI to specific marketing programs. Obviously, everybody wants to prove the value of every piece of everything that they're doing. And so a lot of our roles as marketers is looking for the best ways to do that and to show the value. Not everything is quantifiable, and, it's more qualitative, ROI, but there are ways to show the value for all of these initiatives. That's always a big consideration.
Right. Yeah. ROI, it could be a standalone topic on itself. So as I know, a lot of folks struggle with it, or at least not struggling with ROI necessarily, but struggling with how do I, in the end, do I have the right metrics in place to prove my ROI? I think. So that could be a topic in itself, but enough about that. Unfortunately for our listeners, you won't walk away from today's episode with an exact dollar amount to plan for your marketing budget. No kidding, right? We're not going to be saying hey, look, if you're doing this, this, and this, you got to put, this is how much it should cost your client. Of course not.
Everything is very particular. I mean, they're even two very alike companies could and should have different marketing budgets. And, especially we're definitely talking to too broad of an audience here for that. Our listeners, specific numbers can't work, but I think it's really taking a look at the questions that each of those organizations should be asking themselves so that they can best determine what marketing budget is going to produce the most value for their company in this year. Because, just because you had a $500,000 marketing budget last year doesn't necessarily mean that's what you should have this year. So I really think that's something that should be evaluated and evolve, as the needs of the industry and, the needs of the organization and your goals change.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it. Folks have shifted, priorities over the last year, and will they be getting back to that? So while some folks maybe didn't have a lot of budgeting towards event promotion, event relation, because maybe they've been taking part in a lot more virtual stuff. But now maybe some of that's going to end up back into some of these budgets. So that might, obviously dictate any kind of proposal when you budget things. So, and again, that's just one example. We could probably talk about several like that. But I think, that's why kind of what we were saying at the beginning of the show, I think 2022 might be the year where a lot of us get back in some way to some of the PR and marketing, I guess, basics, or kind of what we did in some way in a pre-pandemic kind of approach. So, but you're right, that's all going to impact budgeting as well.
Yeah. For me, my perspective, I envision a lot event marketing and trade shows and, just conferences, events, whether it be booth exhibits or sponsorships. And I think that hopefully will play a larger role in 2022 across the board. So whether that's early 2022 or, mid 2022 or late, like when in 2022, I don't know, but
right.
It is something that we will see this year in some capacity. So, I introduced this, but I think, the first piece of when you're looking at how do I put together an effective marketing budget is to start with an assessment, like thoroughly evaluate your current situation. It's going to be, as I just mentioned, it's going to be very different for organizations, but I think, really take a look at what you have for resources. Like, what are the skill sets of your current marketing staff? Are they available to tap into for new priorities, or are they already assigned to other items? Are you working with any outside consultants or an agency, and really take a look at the areas in which you're using them and, those expenses and where that falls in your plan and your goals for the coming year.
And along those lines, Jen, when you talk about, are you working with outside consultants or agencies? Also, what about other partners? Are you partnering with strong marketing resources that you can tap into? And that certainly should be considered as well. And I know you could probably rattle off a couple examples of strong marketing resources, so we all know a lot. Again, probably something we've discussed ad nauseum in a past show, but are you partnering with partners with strong marketing resources at your fingertips? A couple of things to consider in your assessment, Jen. How about where are you, the current stage with your company? Are you a startup? Are you 10 years in? So where are you? That's going to determine things, obviously, income levels, profits, things like that.
Definitely where you're at as your stage as a company is huge in determining where your priorities and where your focus is going to lie for marketing resources. And, like you said, your bandwidth.
And then what about things like, of course, to consider, are you, there'll have to be budget set aside for things like if you're about to launch a major initiative, a product or service. So that's kind of a given. And that might be something on the fly, maybe in the beginning, in Q1 or 2. That's something that you're not sure might happen, but still planning for something like that to happen in later on in the year in Q3 and 4 is probably something you want to assess.
Yeah. And also, so definitely taking a look at where you envision your business and your organization in the year ahead. And obviously this is, subject to change and, things happen very quickly and rapidly. Where your organization is going, where you envision yourself, across the year, where your time frame that you're planning your marketing budget. And also, and I think this is something that may be overlooked by some organizations, but when they're thinking marketing budget, but if there's impending like regulations or industry factors that could affect your business, and you can't plan for all of those things, but if you think there's something coming down the line that really would, if it does come to fruition, would be a great opportunity for your organization that you should, budget for, like allocating funds for those pop-up scenarios is always better than trying to pull the funds from other places. So it's almost like a slush fund, a marketing slush fund for unplanned activities, or, just the maybes and the what ifs. Like if this happens, we've got the available budget to tackle it, to address it, to make our name known and, attach ourselves to promoting what's going on in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think that's a critical thing that you raise, especially for marketers and PR professionals, is the impending regulations. A lot of the governing bodies like HHS and within them ONC and CMS, they usually don't surprise you with regulations. A lot of folks know they're coming, But still, you have to somehow communicate these regulations when you know they're going to be final or implemented, and how it's going to impact you, your customers, and what you know about these regulations. So having, that worked into not only your strategic plan, but especially your budget, because you might need new resources, extra marketing efforts thrown towards, again, explaining how these new regulations are going to impact you and your customers, like I said. So I think that's critical, and they really impact so many stakeholders, right? So we're talking about communicators that work within payers, providers, work directly with consumer, anything. So I think, that's a big point that you raised there.
Yeah, and I guess keeping with our show theme, I would call that something
Underused.
when, in a lot of marketing budgets that I have seen, is really setting aside the funds for those unplanned, or not unplanned, but setting aside funds for those, regulatory type scenarios that could pop up, and the opportunities that they do present.
Right, because they're not promotional. People say, well, they're regulations. We know they're coming. We have to adhere to them. But again, they're not like promotional items. So people often forget that, that should be part of your, like I said, your strategic plan and how you're going to communicate that. And then like you had mentioned, what resources we're going to have to tie into communicating these new rules and regulations. So yeah, great point. So you say anything else under assessment? I know we're on the first question we should ask. Anything else that we should mention?
Well, I mean, I think taking a look at, what's the status of your current sales funnel? Like, how do you normally generate leads now? What's worked in the past, promotion wise, and what hasn't. And, just because it didn't work, 2 years ago, things change so quickly that, as we've seen very much, the last few years, things are changing. So really taking a good look at, and not just doing what you've done in the past and putting the funds into, we've always done this webinar with this organization, and so we're just going to keep doing that. I think that's where we get into looking at the ROI and the value that each of these activities brings. So that brings me into what I say is
overrated.
Oh no.
Would be only looking at sales leads as a factor of a success or as your goal. Certainly every organization's goal is to make sales and make money, but there's a lot of intricacies to, not everything is about, generating sales leads. It's certainly important to all organizations. Some companies are positioning themselves to secure, VC funding or to be purchased. And, some companies need industry validation for other purposes, or they, need visibility, or sometimes the CEO just wants to become famous. You should set clear, definable, but realistic goals based on where you want to take your company across the next year. Or I say year because, typically that's where, marketing budgets are across a year span. In what areas you want to grow. But, certainly driving more sales leads is great, but it's not always quantifiable, especially it's like, I saw this article that you did, or, I attended this webinar and then I immediately went to purchase. So it's kind of a lot of times in healthcare and healthcare technology, especially, it's, it's the long game and the moving the customer along in their buyer's journey.
Right. So apologies to the sales managers that were listening to that segment. Jen still loves you. You're doing an amazing job. We need you. But you're right. Two of the things we talked about as you're looking at planning out a budget. So 1 and 2 were 1, assess the situation. We gave you some examples of what you should assess. Second, as Jen just said, set goals, right? But not everything's about sale leads. And so setting goals is key. So how about a third question or thing to consider when budgeting? And I think that thing could be, although we talked about not everything is about generating sales leads, it's still critical to align with the sales team. So right, does that make sense? I mean, they're still a partner. A lot of folks have marketing and sales responsibility too. So that's why I think it's important. It's critical to align with sales teams, your budget as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, marketing and sales, if they are working in partnership, it is always great for an organization, because, marketing job is to
marketers
understanding what the sales team's goals are and what they're looking to accomplish. think can really make a difference in guiding marketing strategy too. How can marketing support that?
Right.
What does sales need so that they can be successful and so that they can, inform customers and and move them along in their buyer's journey to ultimately generate those sales wins.
No, you're right. And aligning with the sales team is also critical, because the sales team would say, hey, this coming year or whatever your budget cycle is, you'd say, well, we need some more of this. Like, I'd love to promote a white paper as part of a campaign. I'd love to have this as part of an email campaign. And so that might take extra dollars to go towards developing those things. Whether you're, again, as we talked about a little earlier in the show, are you aligned with a writer that, may not be internal, but as an external writer that, to write that white paper may cost you an extra $1,500 or something to write. So again, aligning with them and getting to get a good sense of what they need so that you can support their efforts is critical, because it'll impact your budget.
Definitely. If you are just tuning in, you're listening to Overrated and Underused on Healthcare Now Radio. Today's episode is all about marketing budgets. So as you're looking at developing a marketing plan, I think important consideration is to develop your plan based on some of those questions that you evaluated earlier, like what has worked for your organization, what hasn't worked, and then really just looking at trying to have a diverse blend of tactics, with the ultimate goal of, like, in the most simplest of terms, effective marketing is getting the best, most compelling message in front of the largest, most relevant audience, as frequently as you can. So, looking at all of the ways that you can get out there within the budget that your organization has. Yeah. And so this can range, anything from email marketing, event management, website development, advertising, social media. I mean, there's so many things.
Yeah, and not to mention, some of these tactics, some folks are equipped with the right personnel or budget to take on in-house, but then there are some things. So you may have a team inside that's handling media relations, or maybe you don't. Maybe that's something where your media relations efforts have to be, because you think, well, this is a year we have a lot of major news coming out. There are regulations we're going to talk about that we want our CEO to be out in front of. We have new product launches. We're hosting an event, and maybe you want to really center a big media relations campaign around that. So it might require hiring an agency to do some of that media relations work for you. And again, that would uptick your budget. Same thing on the writing for a lot of that stuff. So if your CEO or some of your executive team want to do some more thought leadership piece, sometimes the writing is outsourced, like we said a little earlier, and it can require some added budget dollars to that to pay these freelance writers. And then also the writing can also go towards some of the sponsored content you might decide, right? So sponsored paid campaigns, that too could impact, well, it will impact your budget, because a lot of these aren't cheap. They're not $200 for a 1,200 word piece to run in publication X or Y. They do cost a lot of dollars. So depending on back to your strategy and your initiatives and what you actually want to accomplish in the year ahead, that's why looking through a couple of these tactics and looking at them well and seeing what the dollar value may be if you're going outside of your organization, that's going to be critical for not going over budget or getting stuck and saying, geez, Jen, we can't do that. Sorry, Jen, because we don't have the dollars. So hopefully you can write this piece for us. And it just, so not to leave folks kind of without the opportunity to provide and develop those for media relations, content, marketing, paid opportunities, et cetera.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, when we talk about marketing budgets, any advertising dollars, search engine marketing, any of those paid opportunities that are notoriously paid, are really there's a number of things that you can do out there. So it really just does depend on what your organization is able to spend and allocate towards that. So, if you're an organization that's very lean and, you don't have a lot of advertising dollars to work with, looking at your team of resources, whether that be internal or an agency, and, looking at more of the email or direct marketing route, or, the media relations side, like developing the content, without outside paid writers, might be the way to go, or speaking and award opportunities, right. Going more of that, obviously there's like the we like to put them in the buckets of like paid and non-paid, but everything has a value. And, whether that just be a resource, an internal resource, or, a time investment, or a dollar cost. But, I think as much as you can that you think will be of value to your organization in the next year, and, taking a look at what they will cost you, like set amounts to each of these tactics.
Right. And, in addition to that, this is something that always seems to sneak in there. And it seems obvious to folks, at this stage in the game, those who develop budgets, they know, be sure to work in time and money for those impromptu opportunities, right? I feel like that's something that I fail at, me personally, even on the personal side. Like, it's like a grocery budget. It's like, oh, I'm going to the grocery store and here's my budget. Here's what I need to get. And all of a sudden it's like, oh no, but I'm going to add Oreos. Well, that's impromptu. And I'm going to add, what are your Oreos going to be, right? Like, what's going to be the impromptu, either impulse buy or something you need to get to your budget? And that's a tough one, right? Because I think, how do you set that impromptu? Because some of these tactics we talked about, Jen, they range, right, from a couple hundred to several thousands of dollars. So I don't know, what that is. Is it 10% of your overall budget? Is it, 15%? But again, I think it's a critical. So if you get to that, you talked about almost like a slush fund earlier, but if you get to that, you're probably going to need it at some point if you have a real aggressive budget going for the year ahead.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely think that's important. There's always going to be opportunities that pop up, or, special ad editions, or this new event that you potentially want to exhibit at. So sponsorship that just makes sense for your market, or, a new service line that you want to go after. And so you need to allocate funds to that. So it definitely should be a percentage in some capacity. And then if you don't, if you get close to the, fourth quarter and you haven't spent it, there's no shortage of opportunities out there. So you could allocate more funds towards your to your advertising or to your search engine marketing, or you could hire a writer to write a white paper for you. I think finding ways to spend your money is probably not the problem. It's figuring out how to work within the limitations of each organization's funds. Yep. But I think we're really just scratching the surface here on marketing budgets. So,
but you're right. I think there's a lot to discuss, and it'd be interesting to see some of the stuff that we may have missed too. The challenges or some of the aspects of their budgets and when they're developing a budget too. So you can always tweet at us and let us know what you think.
Inbox with Adrian.
All right, ONU listeners, it's time for your favorite segment. And it's been a long time, but we are very glad to welcome back Adrian Stoner for another one of her magnificent Inbox with Adrians. Welcome, Adrian.
It's good to be back.
All right.
It's been a while.
I
thought that you were kicking me out for good, but looks like I'm making a reappearance for 2022.
We could never kick you out. You are the show staple.
But now that you're back here with us, I'm sure there's some good stuff floating around your inbox, so many to choose from. What did you come up with?
It was hard to narrow it down because it's been so long and my inbox is so crowded with questions. But I decided to go with one about social media. So the question is, what advice would you give someone who is just starting to build their social media presence? I thought that was a great topic to start the new year with. Someone might be rebranding or just getting their feet on the ground. And what better way to do it than with social media? When I think about it, you want to, I think, first establish where is going to best serve you, which platform. There's so many. You have TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. For us, mostly being B2B, I find us best served on LinkedIn and Twitter. But definitely some consumer related products, they would be better served on LinkedIn, maybe Facebook, maybe even TikTok. But I think that's the first thing that you want to try to decide before you open up 4 different accounts and start putting stuff out on all the platforms, creating more work for yourself. That doesn't sound like fun. And I think it's important to stay true to your brand. Don't just do something because you see someone else being successful with it. You will never be successful that way if it's not something that best serves your brand. One thing that I have found helpful to me is to plan ahead. So I know something starting off the new year that I'm going to be very busy in January, February, and March, gearing up for HIMS with our client. And as much as I can work ahead and have things lined up for them and for me, it is very beneficial.
Let me jump in for a second, because I think you brought up a really good point, is that this year, for example, HIMS and Vive are both early on in the year. They're like at the end of Q1. So it might be a good time to really look at your social media and see if you want to really build up that strategy. If you're just launching it, that might be a good opportunity heading towards a big event like HIMS or Vive. So,
if you are attending a new event and wanting to tap into that audience, in that market, you're trying to, as a company, trying to reach that audience, really connecting through whichever platforms on social media could be a good part of your conference planning. Maybe it's something, you are on Twitter and you have a Twitter account, but you haven't been incredibly active the last year. Events and kind of tapping into those event hashtags, or, just seeing the conference themselves and people that are following or engaging with the event on social media could be a good market.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. You always see a high spike in analytics around conferences and people engaging that usually don't. So I think another important thing to do is set goals. And I don't necessarily mean goals in the form of ROI. I just mean something to be consistent, because consistency is key with social media. So say you want to make 2 posts a day, Monday through Friday, or you want to make 1 post a day, whatever makes the most sense for you and your brand. I think that is an important place to start with setting goals as a new social media account.
Sometimes it's easy to forget about making your daily LinkedIn post or, whatever it may be. So, setting the kind of parameters around what your end goal is, what you're looking to build with your social media following, and then what it's going to take to kind of accomplish that, and sticking to it. So find a schedule that works for you, works for, the resources that you have and the time investment and the content that you have. Like Adrian said, consistency is key when it comes to social media. All right. Well, that is a good one. We hope to see so much more of you in 2022, Adrian. Thanks for joining this awesome episode.
I can't wait to be back.
Thanks to our listeners for joining us today. We are sponsored by Anderson Interactive and can be heard weekdays at 10 a.m., 6 p.m., and 2 a.m. Eastern on Healthcare Now Radio. And a reminder that we are always looking for brilliant marketers to join us for an upcoming Outside Insights segment. Are you a health IT marketer at a corporation or agency that can join us for 10 minutes on a future episode? We would love to hear from you. So you can share your anecdotes of promotional campaigns for your organization, or describe what marketing tactics you see as overrated and underused. So if that sounds like you and something you'd be interested in, send us an email at hello@andersoni, that's the letter I.com. And you can also email your Inbox with Adrian questions to that same email, or tweet us at Jen_Jennings, Tom_Testa, or Adrian_Stoner, and use the hashtag #OverUnderRadio. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Overrated and Underused show with your hosts, experienced marketers Jen Jennings and Tom Testa, and special guest Adrian Stoner. Overrated.